In Chapter 7, we are going to look at current asset management. And to clarify what we're talking about, let's look at the balance sheet for BB Stores. And this is a little bit dated, but I wanted to pull this up to illustrate a point. When we're talking about current assets, we're mostly talking about the items right here. You see that there are a couple of other current assets that are listed here: deferred income taxes and prepaid. We're going to be concerned with cash, marketable securities, accounts receivable, and inventories. And so those are really these items that are highlighted in blue, and over time, of course, those are going to change. Companies are concerned with managing each of these four items: the cash level, the marketable securities level, and the reason is because companies can't function unless they have cash that's adequate to pay their bills, unless they have inventories that are adequate to meet demand. But on the other hand, they don't want to have too much inventory, and they don't want to have too much cash on hand, which may sound surprising, but the fact of the matter is a firm can have more cash than it needs. On the other hand, it needs to have enough cash to meet its requirements. There are also a number of issues related to accounts receivable. Who are you going to extend credit to? That's a choice you have to make. So let's just look for a moment. Focus here. This is really sort of introductory. We'll get into this in more detail. Let's look at this cash and cash equivalents, which for BB Stores in 2007, July of 2007, was $65 million essentially. That number might look fairly large, but let's pull up the 2009-2010 report, and here you'll see that the cash and cash equivalents level has actually gone up very substantially. And I don't seem to be able to get rid of that little element, but it's gone up very substantially to $194 million. It turns out that between 2007 and 2010, BB Stores reduced its marketable securities very substantially and increased its level of cash. And the reasons it did that have to do with so originally you see a marketable security measure of some 200 and well, I'm having trouble circling it here, but we'll just highlight it here. The $327 million right there, but in the later periods that was substantially reduced, and the securities available for sale as well as the other securities only are about $58 million here. What happened in between? Well, there was a very significant recession. Many retailers found that they really didn't have enough cash on hand because they were faced with banks' reluctance to lend them money right at the time when they needed it the most. And so many retailers, in the way that BB Stores has responded, increased the level of cash just to ensure that they would have enough money to get by when they may not get adequate funding from their banks. So that's just sort of to lay the groundwork. Let's pull back up the PowerPoint. Take a quick look at the outline here. We're going to do, in this chapter, an introduction of the management of these current assets, these four in particular: cash, marketable securities, inventory, and accounts receivable. And we're going to talk about the importance of cash management. We're going to actually spend more time on cash management than the other items. Companies can't function if they can't pay their bills, and they pay their bills with cash. We're going to talk briefly about the management of marketable securities. These can be relatively quickly turned back into cash, but they earn a return, which cash sitting in a drawer does not. We're going to talk about accounts receivable. Accounts receivable need to, in fact, earn a return, basically. You expect to, if you're going to grant credit to your customers, you expect that you're going to earn a return that probably is somewhat similar to the return that somebody else granting them credit would expect to earn, maybe even a little bit more. Inventory management, we're going to discuss identifying the appropriate level of inventory. If you have too much inventory, obviously that's costly and the inventory can go stale. If you don't have enough inventory, you can be subject to stockouts where you lose sales because you don't have anything to sell to the customer. And in general, we're going to discuss how, as we move down the ladder of liquidity from cash to marketable securities to receivables and finally to inventory. Inventories are the least liquid of those. You may have inventory sitting for months in some businesses. Some businesses turn inventory very quickly, but others may have you may have to have months worth of supply available at some point in time because you just don't sell very often. The more liquid the security, the more liquid the asset is, the less concerned with return we are likely to be. The less liquid assets need to earn a return because we're investing for a substantial period of time in them. Companies need to manage their current assets well because frankly, doing so gives them a competitive advantage over companies that don't do as good a job of managing these short-term assets. And that doing it well will lead to greater market share. For example, if you're handling receivables well, you will gain customers through prudently granting credit to customers. And on the other hand, you want to avoid giving credit to deadbeats. But in general, managing current assets should increase shareholder value if it's done well. The process requires a careful allocation of the resources between these, and as we've already discussed, we're talking about cash, marketable securities, and accounts receivable. When we're managing cash and marketable securities, our primary concern is with the safety and liquidity of the cash and marketable securities. Marketable securities, we want to hold things that are liquid that we can turn into cash in case we need it. We're only secondarily concerned with maximizing profitability on those particular investments. When we turn to accounts receivable and inventory, we are much more concerned about profitability, and we're less concerned about liquidity. Having said that, we don't want to hold too much in inventory because that's costly, and we don't want to be waiting too long for receivables to be collected. We want those to be liquid as well. So we will now leave this introductory section, and the next thing we're going to talk about is cash management.